I think a good place to sort of start with these Q&As is just to say, you know, what was the beginning? What was the beginning of the idea? How did you come to make the film?
We had a friend, Flora Lazar, who decided to go to the French pastry school, and she told us about the competition. In Chicago, and she told us about the competition and Jackie Pfeiffer competing, and so we found it interesting. I mean, she described it as being, you know, this Olympics of pastry. So we went out to meet Jackie, and we went to lunch with him, and it was when he kind of said that, you know, he woke up at night and, you know, had all these nightmares, and his wife kind of, you know, said that, you know, the competition was off and this and that, and it just seemed like the most stressful thing that, you know, he was going through this every night, and it seemed like an interesting thing to try to do.
And he was clearly an extremely competent chef. So the assumption was he'd go to this contest and win it. So we thought, well, that would be a good film. Off we went.
Right there.
Did Jackie go back and try a second time after this? Because I know this was made a few years ago.
So did Jackie go back and try a second time?
No, he didn't go back and do it. It's very, very expensive for somebody to compete in this from America, because you have to actually do a semi-final, which is a 2-day version of this. Plus it also has like small sandwiches and something to it, because a lot of pastry shops also have sandwiches. So, you know, it's just very rigorous, and, you know, he had to, you know, rent a whole, you know, freight container to put all his stuff on and bring across on an airplane, and, you know, it was too expensive to do again.
But he got the girl. And in fact, he got, it's as if his life just emerged, a whole new kind of person came, and he's been very successful ever since. He's written a book, which is a beautiful book. He got the
Paul Bocuse Award.
No, not Bocuse, the other one. He got the.
He's gotten several pastry
Yeah.
awards since then, so he's, you know, he's elevated his career
He's
to a
such a
point where
marvelous person.
I don't think he needs them all.
I don't feel sorry for him. What I think emerges in the film is character, which is always a hard thing to find and film.
But to be honest, I think he would love to have the collar.
Oh.
You know, he stares at, you know, Sebastian every day with it, and I think, you know, if you're from France, it's, you know, the highest award you can get.
Right there.
One of the things that came out in the film, the chefs who were, or the pastry chefs who were competing, they seemed to be very convivial with each other and not mean to each other, or, you know, they were really gentlemen about this competition. And I guess I'm curious, was it really like that? And were they as supportive of each other as it came out in the film?
So the question was just, the pastry chefs all actually they seem quite supportive of each other. Was that really how it was?
You know, I'm sure there is backbiting that goes on, but it's a pretty small community of people who are at this level, and they know each other. And, you know, and in a lot of ways, that's probably why Philippe won, because they thought he should be part of that club, because they knew he was, you know, really of the highest caliber there was. So, you know, I think there was a lot of that, and I think they strive for that, whether they, you know, continually are that way, but I think that's part of what the award is about.
Right?
Yeah, two questions. One, is there any French chauvinism involved in the competition? And also, it seemed like a very white and male group. Is anybody?
You have to be French.
Yeah.
Even if you come from Chicago, he was French and had gone there. I don't think you could be in it in the contest unless you were of French extraction. How they determine that, I don't know.
But the question was actually,
Oh.
you know, were there, it seems chauvinist and white, and yes, it was. I mean, there was, a woman had never competed for the MOF in the pastry category. That year was the first year that a woman competed in the hot food, you know, the main dish type of category, which was a much lesser competition. It's a one-day competition, but a woman competed in that, and I think she got to be a MOF, if I remember correctly. But when we were shooting this and went into you know, some of the kitchens of moth chefs. One of them had these women in the kitchen, and he was preparing one of them to compete in another 8 years, he said. And so that's, you know, kind of the rigor that they set in their careers and going for this type of competition. But yes, I think the culinary world in France is, you know, pretty chauvinistic, basically. But I think women are starting to make a statement there.
Can I hear a second one?
What were the particular challenges of shooting film in a kitchen? And did you guys ever break something by accident?
What were the particular challenges of shooting in a kitchen, and did you ever accidentally break something?
They killed you. It was made very clear to us at the beginning that each day they would vote on whether we should come back the next day. And the third day was the big day of carrying out everything. And the guy said, you know, if you accidentally cause one of them to break their statues, they'll kill you. So we went very carefully that day.
I mean, actually, that day they drew a little square on the ground at the end of the table and said, that's where you have to stand today. So, you know, we couldn't move around. I mean, it was quite a challenge. We didn't have any access to this competition until the day before it started, basically, because, you know, we decided to do the film with Jackie. We met him in July, and then in August, you know, no one works in France, so we couldn't get a hold of the organization to ask, and then we decided to go anyway to France to just, you know, see if we could convince them while we were there. We did a lot of phone calls. We found, you know, the other chefs that we filmed a little bit with, at least, and then, you know, we got to the competition, and you know, that was kind of the rule, is that each day they would decide whether they wanted us again, and then the last day was very restricting, and we, you know, we couldn't have lights, we couldn't have sound. I mean, it was very homemade done compared to their extravagance.
Nobody had ever been allowed to even film it or even look at it before. So in a sense, we didn't kind of comprehend that at the beginning, that letting us in was a big deal for them.
Just right here.
Oh, congratulations on successfully showing Sarkozy as a human being.
Oh.
That was a fantastic moment. I don't think he's ever been.
Well, he got married just shortly after that. He was in a very happy mood.
And compared to the whole opus of Pennebaker, you know, where do you put this? Is it a special jewel, or how can you situate it in terms of the rest of your work?
So the question is sort of like, how do you situate this film in terms of the context of like the rest of your work, large catalog?
Well, we haven't done many pastry films.
I
never compare things like that. It's like, well, you know, comparing your children.
Well, I mean, I think it's similar to almost, you know, so many of our films, where we look for people who are really good at what they're doing, and they're, you know, extremely passionate, and they're pursuing some kind of dream. And, you know, that's exactly, you know, what Jackie Pfeiffer was, and, you know, it's the same thing as Bob Dylan or James Carville, or, you know, a lot of the people that we filmed.
In addition to Jackie, you focused on a couple of other chefs. Did you focus on more than those two, and then you decided to stick with those two guys? And if so, how did you decide to pick them?
So in addition to Jackie, there were several other chefs that were featured. Were there more than that originally, and how did you decide to cut down to these characters, if so?
Yeah, there was just actually one other one that got the collar, actually, that we followed a little bit. It just was very difficult, because when we came in on this at this late date, you know, they'd already done the semifinal, and, you know, the competition when we arrived in France was like 6 weeks away. So the idea of letting these Americans kind of come in and, you know, cause them stress at this point, you know, was not something that most of them wanted to do. So, you know, it was really, you know, who would let us film a bit with them.
Are there other questions in the audience that I just can't see? Okay, right here.
Will there be a DVD coming this, or?
Yeah, there's a DVD of this film. Yep, you can get it.
You can buy it immediately. Yes.
What are you working on now?
What are you working on now?
We're working on an animal rights film with a lawyer who has three cases in New York to have chimpanzees released from cages, and he's doing it with what do you call it, the habeas corpus, and when you get a habeas corpus decree from a court allowing you to have somebody released, they have to be released as a person. So what he hopes to do is to have the courts declare a chimpanzee a legal person, which will be quite a legal moment. And we hope to be there filming when we see the judge who does that.
Very different than French pastry.
Yeah.